Okay, today we're going to start on Chesamid base towards the bottom, 8b, and it's on the bottom. It's 7, 8, 9 lines from the bottom. Okay, thank Hashem that we're able to learn Torah every day. In this place of learning, we should have a base Mikdash and learning for Shleima, for my father, and also Naftali ben Menachem. Okay, in order to understand the following Gemara, and all the Gemara today, that other Gemara there, again, don't worry. I just want to go over the Mishnah, the first Mishnah we learned a little over a week ago. After we had the two that are 4, then we went into the different the different goat sacrifices that are brought on Yom Kippur. There's 2 that are on Yom Kippur, and then there's the holiday one, the regalim, and then there's the Rosh Chodesh goat, all sin offerings that are brought. And each one is brought for some other thing, and there's machlekes about it. So the Mishnah started off saying that if there is, if someone comes impure, if someone is impure and he comes into the temple, so he has to bring a oil of Yered sacrifice. He himself has to bring the oil of Yered. That's his own sacrifice that he brings. Now, but this would only be if he knew about it originally, then he forgot when he went into the temple, and then he finds out about it later, then he brings that sacrifice. Then we have some other things. What happens if he knows about it originally, but he doesn't know about it afterwards? He forgets and he continues to forget, and Yom Kippur comes by. So for that, the Mishnah says that the Sar Hanasa Bifnim, the goat that was brought inside the inner chamber in the Mishkan, that will be an atonement for that. Let's say he doesn't know originally, but he finds out later. How does he find out later if he never knew? Someone tells him that you were originally. So then there's another goat which is brought on Yom Kippur. That's the Saranas Bachutz. That's the Musaf offering of Yom Kippur, which is brought. So the first goat was brought if there was no awareness, that if there was no awareness at the end. That's the goat that was brought. You remember there were 2 goats. One was pushed off Azazel, and the other goat was the sacrifice. So that sacrifice was brought if there was an awareness before, but no awareness at the end. Then if there was no awareness before, and there was yes an awareness at the end, then the other goat, the Musaf offering of Yom Kippur, is another goat. That's called the Sar Hanasa Bachutz. That would atone for that when there's an awareness at the end, but not before. And then what happens if there's no awareness at all? So then we have the holiday goats, and we also have the Rosh Chodesh goat, which is brought for that. All of this is the opinion of Rabbi Yehuda. Then we're going to have the opinion of Rabbi Shimon, who's going to adjust this a little bit. Then we're going to have the opinion of Rabbi Meir. And then we're going to have the name of Rabbi Shimon. We're going to have Rabbi Shimon ben Yehuda in the name of Rabbi Shimon. Yeah. Okay, let's start really now. It says like this. There's no awareness originally, but there's an awareness at the end. How does that happen? He didn't know that he was tummy, but someone else was there and saw that he was tummy and saw that he entered into the temple, and then tells him, hey, by the way, you were tummy when you did that. So he can't bring his own offering, sin offering, because that's only if you knew it originally. What's going to be an atonement for him? So the Mishnah said, Sar Hanasa Bachutz v'Yom Kippur Mechaper. The goat of the Musaf offering on Yom Kippur, that's the Sar Hanasa Bachutz. In Yom Kippur itself will be an atonement. What's this Mechdi? Iskish Iskushi Iskish La'adadi. Both of those were compared one to another. What was the comparison that we had? It said it was a comparison that compared the 2 goats one to another. Okay, so if that's the case,
says the person didn't know anything and then he found out even about the concept and so on.
We had an opinion before that the knowledge that we're talking about is that he knew the concept. I don't know if everyone followed that. That was like an abaya before. Was it abaya on this? What page was that? Where he learned it in yeshiva, right? Hey, that's where he brought up the Tanakh Shinishma. I'm not sure if everyone follows that. I'm not sure about that. I'm not sure if that's what we're referring to. Whatever the case is, awareness, and you're suggesting that when it says an awareness originally, it means that he went to yeshiva. That is definitely one of the opinions in the Gemara before. I'm not sure if every time we're mentioning that, if that's what we're referring to. Okay, so it says Mechde. Let's see, Eskushi Isker Sladadi. Both of these sacrifices are compared one to another. And when we say both, we're referring to the sa'ir that's brought inside the inner chamber, right? The blood was brought inside. The goat, sorry, it was a goat that was brought inside, and the goat that was not brought inside. Both of those on Yom Kippur. One was the pear, right? That's called Sar Hanasa Bifnim, and then the other one was called the Sar Hanasa Bachutz. Chutz means outside. So the goat that was outside was from the Musaf offering, huh? So what was the word? Chutz. Oh, like chutzlaras, right? So the Gemara asks, if they're compared, if they're learned one from another, so let the inner one be an atonement also for what the outer one is an atonement for. Let it accomplish both. Now, the inner one is an atonement for when there's an awareness originally, but there's no awareness at the end. The outer one is an atonement for when there's awareness at the end, but not originally. So you can remember this like this, because Pnimi, inner one, means that he knew originally. That's inner. He knew originally. That's where the awareness is. The outer one, just to remember, something to do. The outer one is when he knew at the end, but he did not know originally. So we're asking, let the inner one atone for both of those. But nafkamina, why do we need that? But the practical application of that would be lahechad layavet chitzon. Let's say Rashi explains this, that maybe you didn't have enough sacrifices, so they only brought the inner one. They didn't have the outer one. So okay, let it be an atonement for him as well. Gemara says on this, Amar Kra, the pasuk says achas. It says v'kiper arain al karnaisav achas bashana, that he will do an atonement once a year. And what does that tell me? Kapara achas mechaper, that it's only one atonement. Ve'ina mechaper stay kaparas, it doesn't do two atonements. Because it's only going to atone for if he knew originally, but he didn't know at the end. It's not going to atone for if he knew at the end and not originally. Okay, so the Gemara says now, once you did a comparison between the two, let's work it the other way. Let's say that if you did the second offering should atone for both. Now, 1 second, if you already brought the first offering, so why would he need the second offering? The Gemara explains, the difference would be, let's say there was someone that was Tameh that came into the temple in between the first offering, the inner offering was brought, and the outer offering was brought. But so what? The outer offering should atone for both. So the Gemara says, Amar Kra achas b'shana, once a year. Kaparazu loitei ela achas b'shana. The atonement for this is only done once a year. We don't do this more than once a year. In other words, there's only one atonement that's going to take place. It's not going to be atoned for by both sacrifices. Now, we quote something that's not in the Mishnah. We're on top of that test. Rabbi Shmuel, the Amar, there's an opinion of Rabbi Shmuel, which we mentioned this in passing before, but it's really coming up, I think, in the next chapter. He holds that if you don't have awareness beforehand, but you do have awareness afterwards, you still have to bring a sacrifice. Now, when we say a sacrifice, it means your own sacrifice. Carbon oil of Yared. Carbon oil of Yared. What we've been learning so far, the sliding scale, sacrifice. That was only if there was an awareness originally, an awareness at the end, and a forgetting in the middle. Comes along Rabbi Shmuel and says no. It even applies when there was no awareness in the beginning, but an awareness at the end. You still have to bring that sacrifice. So according to Rabbi Shmuel, so if he doesn't know originally, but he knows at the end, he has to bring his own sacrifice. So what is the goat that's brought as the Musaf offering on Yom Kippur atone for? We said that there's no sacrifice for that. It's only the goat of Yom Kippur. According to Rabbi Shmuel, there is a personal sacrifice. He has to bring his own sacrifice. What are we saying Yom Kippur? So what is Yom Kippur going to atone for? The goat that's brought outside. It says Al Shem B'Yediyah LeBetchila VeLeBesayf. That's an atonement for when there's no awareness at all. Yeah.
Does it make a difference? It's the same offering, whether
Yeah, it's the same offering. It's the same offering. He just says as long as there's an awareness at the end, that's good enough. Once you know, you bring the offering. If you don't know, then those public offerings would satisfy that. If you personally knew that you did an avera, you would enter the temple impure, then there's an offering that you have to bring, even if you didn't know beforehand.
Usually, isn't there a difference knowing beforehand?
Yeah, that's the other opinions. But Shmuel doesn't have that difference. So, what is the goat of Yom Kippur going to bring? We're on Tess. What's the goat of Yom Kippur going to do? That's going to cover if he didn't have any awareness at all of his sin. He didn't know beforehand, and he didn't know afterwards, and of course, he didn't know while he was doing it. He was impure and he entered. The Gemara says, 1 second, that's the Yom Kippur sacrifice. According to the Mishnah, according to Rabbi Yehuda's opinion in the Mishnah, that is about 6 lines down. That is what the goats of Rosh Chodesh and of the holidays. That's what they atone for. The Gemara answers for this. Savalak Reb Meir. Rabbi Shmuel would follow the opinion of Reb Meir. The Amar Kol Hasirim Kaprasan Shava. All the goats have the same atonement. Ultimus Mikdash Kadasha. For impurity that happens if someone enters into the temple or if he eats sacrificial food when he's stomach. El Mai Hilchasa. So what do we gain by doing the comparison, the outer one to the inner one? It means the outer goat to the inner goat. That comparison, see, according to the other opinion, the comparison between the outer goat and the inner goat was to tell me that just like the inner goat, there's an atonement for an awareness. So too the outer one is the outer goat also is an atonement for something that there was awareness. What awareness? Awareness at the end. The inner goat was an awareness at the beginning. The outer goat was awareness at the end. Just like this has an awareness, that one has an awareness. According to Rabbi Shmuel, if there's an awareness at the end, he has to bring his personal sacrifice, not the goat of Yom Kippur. So what is the comparison for? Gemara explains the comparison was just to tell me that the goats of Yom Kippur are only an atonement for impurity of the temple. It's not coming for any other averos, just impurity of the temple. Yom Kippur is for all the goats. It's for impurity of the temple. Okay, so it's a comparison to tell me what it's not referring to, not what it is yes referring to. It's not referring to any other sins. Now we're back in the Mishnah. If there's no awareness at all of his impurity, not beforehand, not while, of course, and not afterwards either. He doesn't know later either. So then, what atonement will he have? The goats of the holidays and the goats of Rosh Chodesh, that will atone. Every Rosh Chodesh and every holiday, there was Musaf offerings, and amongst the Musaf offerings there were goats, or a single goat. And that goat would atone for when there was a person didn't realize he was Tameh and he entered the temple. Divrei Rabbi Yehuda. That's the words of Rabbi Yehuda. Amar Rabbi Yehuda Amar Shmuel. We say Amar Rabbi Yehuda Amar Shmuel, but it's a different Rabbi Yehuda. We just said in the Mishnah, we quoted Rabbi Yehuda. Rabbi Yehuda is Rabbi Yehuda Rabbi Loi. He's one of Rabbi Akiva's students. One of the 5 students that Rabbi Akiva had at the end. Rabbi Akiva had 5 students at the end. The first 24,000 died, but then at the end he had 5. They are Rabbi Meir, Rabbi Yosi ben Chalafta, Rabbi Yehuda Rabbi Loi, Rabbi Lazar ben Shamua, and Rabbi Shimon bar Yochai. And Rabbi Yehuda was the one that just told us, Rabbi Yehuda Rabbi Loi, he just told us that if there was no awareness at all, the goats of the holidays and goats of Yom Kippur atone. Comes along the Gemara and says that Rav Yehuda says in the name of Shmuel, different Rabbi Yehuda, it's Rabbi Yehuda bar Yecheskel. He's a student of Rav, he's a student of Shmuel. He says, my time with Rabbi Yehuda, what's the explanation for Rabbi Yehuda Rabbi Loi that says that the goats will atone for no awareness? Amakra, Usir Izim Echad Lachatas Lashem. This pasuk is said by the Rosh Chodesh offering, right? Yeah. Parshas Pinchas gives us all the Musaf offerings. And one of them is the goat that's brought on Rosh Chodesh. It says that this a single goat that's brought as a sin for Hashem. Now, the La Hashem could mean to Hashem, could mean for Hashem. The prefix Lamed in Hebrew means 2 or 4. For Hashem, or to Hashem. Either way, it fits perfectly. It doesn't matter which one it is. Now, what we're saying now is that this is a goat that's brought to Hashem or for Hashem. It means that it's a sin that only Hashem knows about. Why? Because this individual has no awareness of it at all. Okay, that's what he learns from the La Hashem. Yisar Zemachaper. This goat will atone for something that only Hashem knows about. Hi, the Gemara asks, "Can we look to Reish Lakish?" We have a famous Gemara in Chulin. Reish Lakish says, "Nam Reish Lakish manistana sar so Reish Chodesh nemer by Hashem." Why? By I think all the holidays it says that you bring one goat. It's only by Reish Chodesh it says you bring a goat for Hashem. Why does it say for Hashem on Reish Chodesh? Reish Lakish explains because Amar Kadosh Baruch Hashem says, this goat is an atonement for me because I diminished the moon. Originally, when Hashem made the two luminaries, so the moon came and said, it's not good to have two kings. So he said, okay, diminish yourself. So because of that, Hashem appeased him by no, he didn't appease him. He gave him stars at night. So, but as an atonement for that, so whatever that means, atonement for Hashem. As an atonement for that, we bring a goat every Rosh Chodesh. Yeah. By the waters, when Hashem split the waters, there's an appeasement by putting salt on the altar. The lower water, even though it's not next to Hashem, but it's the salt from the water, sea salt, goes on the altar on the sacrifices. That was it. But for this one, there was no appeasement, at least what I remember. So it's just the sacrifice that we bring. So you're telling me that this sacrifice of Rosh Chodesh is for the atonement of someone that has no awareness. Reish Lakish says no, it's an atonement for Hashem for diminishing the size of the moon. When we don't eat fruits for 3 years. All right. I'm sorry. Oh, Imkain lemakra al Hashem. The Gemara says, why doesn't it say it's an atonement on Hashem, which would mean more for Hashem? My la Hashem, what does it mean to Hashem? Look at the Amran coming to teach me that it's for something that only Hashem knows. He says, maybe we should reject Reish Lakish. It doesn't say al Hashem, an atonement on Hashem. It says an atonement to Hashem because this is only something Hashem knows. It says chatas Hashem. We could say a sin offering of Hashem in Hebrew. When you have two nouns next to each other, it's called smichas. In English, it gets translated as of. You add the word of. Chatas of Hashem. Chatas of Hashem. My la Hashem, what does it mean? To Hashem? Shamat Minatarti is going to teach me that there's two things here. One is an atonement for something that only Hashem knows about, which means the person was impure and he entered the temple. The other one is an atonement for Hashem for diminishing the moon. Maybe it should also atone for other Averis, this sin offering of Yom Kippur. Tana de Rabbi Yishmael was taught in the yeshiva of Rabbi Yishmael. Just like this sacrifice, the sacrifice of Yom Kippur was brought on a designated time. And also the sacrifice of Rosh Chodesh is brought on a designated time. Just like the sacrifice of Yom Kippur is only an atonement for Tumas Mikdash Kedushav. Avzein and Mechaper al Tumas Mikdash Kedushav. Also, the atonement of Rosh Chodesh is only Tumas Mikdash Kedushav. It says, Ashkan Tzir Rosh Chodeshim. Okay, you've explained to me the goat of Rosh Chodesh. What about the goat of the Musaf offering of the holidays? Siri Galam Minalan. How do we know what the goat of the holidays, that it's an atonement for when there's no awareness? If you're going to say that we're going to learn this from Rabbi Yishmael because it comes at a designated time, we could ask on that. 1 second. If you say we're going to learn it from Rosh Chodesh, I'll say no. Rosh Chodesh is different. I can't learn it from Rosh Chodesh. It came Tadr, because Rosh Chodesh is so frequent. The holidays is only 3 times a year. Rosh Chodesh is 12 times a year. So the frequency means that it's holier and it has a different power. Imid Yom Kippur, if maybe we'll learn it from Yom Kippur, say 1 second, but Yom Kippur came Meruba Kaparasi. But Yom Kippur has a strength of atoning, even for things of Karas. Maybe this won't atone. So v'chitem, you'll say, if you're going to say Hagamrinan Rosh Chodesh mid Yom Kippurim v'lei Prachina, 1 second. But we just learned Rosh Chodesh from Yom Kippur, right? That was what Tana Bey Rabbi Shmuel did. They said, how do we know that it's atonement only for Tumas Mikdash Kedusha, for impurity of the temple, but it's not for other sins? We said, well, just like on Yom Kippur, it's only an atonement, so too on Rosh Chodesh. But if Yom Kippur is so much stronger than Rosh Chodesh, how do you learn Rosh Chodesh from Yom Kippur? Like we're saying now that you can't learn the holidays from Yom Kippur. How did you learn Rosh Chodesh from Yom Kippur? Over there, it says Chatas Lashem by Rosh Chodesh. It says Kapara Michtav Ksiva. It says that it's a kapara. Gila Milsa Balmo. It's just telling us what is a kapara for. Aval Hacha, but over here, Ikal Meimar Kula Milsa like Amrina. We don't learn anything from it. Okay. We're not bringing any offerings to the moon. We're bringing an offering to Hashem, and it's an atonement for diminishing the moon, which would mean that it's an appeasement to the moon that we're mentioning what happened on Rosh Chodesh. That's what it sounds like.
Oh, so it would be
It's like a schus. Oh no. The moon gets a schus. Gets credits. No, we don't bring any sacrifices to anyone else.
Yeah. Everything is for Hashem.
Okay. What does it mean over here? The whole concept of kapara. So what does it say by the holidays when it says the goat? It doesn't mention that it's a chatas. It says it's a chatas. Parshas Pinchas. Yeah. No, we're bringing it to Hashem on behalf of Hashem in the merit of the moon. On behalf of Hashem, yeah. So it's close to the moon because the moon got diminished, so it gets this an extra merit. B'chidash, it's got to be in Rosh Hashanah. Oila LaHashem, Parmeni Bakar Shem Kosim Shleishes Shreinim Yisarnis Kayim. Usiiris Emechad Lachatas LaHashem. That's the Rosh Chodesh. Rosh Chodesh, okay, we know about. We said Chatas LaHashem. What about Pesach? Usiiris Emechad Lachaper Aleichem. It doesn't say Chatas. It just says an atonement. So shouldn't kapara mean that it's an atonement for something? I guess what it's saying is that by Yom Kippur it says the term chatos. By Rosh Chodesh it uses the word chatos. By the holidays it doesn't use the word chatos. So it's an atonement, but I can't learn that from Yom Kippur. Okay, that's what we're getting now. Okay, Ella. So we're asking before, how do we know that the holidays are an atonement for Tumas Mikdash Ukdashav, for impurity that's coming to the? How do you know that? We can't learn it from Rosh Chodesh because Rosh Chodesh is more frequent. We can't learn it from Yom Kippur because Yom Kippur has is more powerful atonement. Ela Kedama Rab Chama Bar Rabbi Chanina. Rab Chama Bar Chanina is a second generation of Meir in Eretz Yisrael. Rab Chanina was the student of Rebbe, great student of Rebbe. Rab Chama Bar Chanina is his son. He explains that we're going to learn it like this. This is all in the opinion of Rabbi Meir, right? But in Rabbi Yehuda, we already had this clarified because we mixed together Siri Regalim, Siri Shkodashim, come to Rabbi Yehuda. Okay. Oh, so let's see. No, it's actually it could be referring to anyone because they all said that the goat of the sacrifice is atonement for Tumas Mikdash Ukdashav. It says Seir over here. It says Seir, which is Seir by Rosh Chodesh. Seir Zimechad Lachatas Hashem, and it also says Useir. No, I'm sorry. It could have said Usi. It says Useir. Let's see by the holidays. Let's see Useir. On Pesach it says Useir. It didn't say Seir. This is by the holidays. Instead of saying seir, a goat, it says and the goat. So that's coming to teach me hachanami sar v'sar. Also by us, we'll learn from the fact that it says useir and the ishka siragam sirash chodashim. And then we'll do a comparison. Masi rash chodashim min chaper melal shein b'yidiyah leb'tchil leb'seif. Mafsi regalim min mechaper melal shein b'yidiyah leb'tchil leb'seif. We're learning that they have the same atonement. So there must be what's going on here is a comparison between the two. Both of them say Usir Zemech Lachatas Lashem, and both of them have the extra vav, which means and. The holiday and Rosh Chodesh. That comparison is coming to tell me that they both have the same atonement. Okay, Ibaylo, the Gemara has a question. Ki Amar Rabbi Yehuda, when Rabbi Yehuda said, "Al she'ein ba yidiyah lebetchil le'seif," that when you don't have when there's no awareness originally and there's no awareness at the end, that the atonement is going to be from the goat sacrifice of Rosh Chodesh, the end of the holidays, right? Hani mili, do we say that this is only b'chei chen sefer livada when it's impossible for him to find out because no one was there when he entered, no one saw him entering. But if other people saw him entering or other people with him, maybe they know that he was tamei. In other words, when we said that there's no awareness at the end, is that because it's impossible for there to be any awareness because no one was there, or does it mean that even if it is possible to be for someone to tell them later, they have cameras? And in such a case, if it's possible for there to be Yediyah B'Seif, then we consider it as if there is. And then we're going to need the outer goat of Yom Kippur, which atones for any time when there's awareness at the end, but not at the beginning. Or perhaps afilu or maybe because at this point no one knows about it, only Hashem will still say that the goat of Rosh Chodesh and the goat of the holidays will atone. Yeah, we don't have an answer to this so far. Gemara says, Tashema, bring a brisa. Tanya was starting a brisa. If someone doesn't know that he was impure, not originally or at the end, there's no awareness of his impurity when he entered. Oh, beforehand or afterwards, or and while. And then it adds in, the brisa adds in one more detail. And also, if there's a sin that in the end he will find out, it doesn't matter. As long as he doesn't know at that point, even if there's potential for him to find out later, the goat of Chodesh and the goat of the holiday will be an atonement for that. Yeah, so we learned like more information than what you normally get about the goat of Rosh Chodesh, the goat of the holidays. There's always, after all the musaf sacrifice, there's always and one goat. From one goat, there's always that one goat. That what is that for? That's for the impurity of someone that wasn't aware, not beforehand and not afterwards. There's an atonement that takes place with this goat. These goats, because it's Rosh Chodesh and the holiday. I don't know if it's associated with that. What is that actually referring to? The goat that my father brought to. If the Stein would know. Yeah. Shimon has his own opinion here. He says, he says the holiday goats, they atone for Tumas Mikdash Kedusha if someone is impure and he enters into the temple. But the goat of Rosh Chodesh is different. The goat of Rosh Chodesh atones not for someone that enters the temple when he's impure, not for someone that's impure when he eats the sacrificial meat. Rather, it's the opposite. It's someone that's pure, but he eats meat of a sacrifice that became tamei. This problem was with the sacrifice. That the sacrifice became tamei, and that's going to be the goat of Rosh Chodesh. If the sacrifice became tamei, and the person ate it, a person that was allowed to eat a regular sacrifice ate it, and he ate the impure sacrifice, that there was a problem on the object, not on the hefza. There was a problem, not on the gavra, not on the person. So then there's a special 12 times a year. The goat of Rosh Chodesh would atone for that. Amar Rabbi Lazar. Rabbi Lazar is the Amira, he's a friend of Rabbi Yechanan, Rish Lakish. This is Rabbi Lazar ben Pidas. Lives in Eretz Yisrael. Amar Rabbi Shai says the name of Rabbi Shai. My time with the Rabbi Shimon. Where does Rabbi Shimon get? What's the reason for Rabbi Shimon that he says that the goat of Rosh Chodesh is an atonement for a sacrifice that became tamei and a person that was tar ate it? Amar Kra says in the pasuk. The pasuk is by the inauguration offering. It says va'isa nasan lachem laseis esavayna eda. That sacrifice that was brought should be to carry the sin of the congregation. And this was talking about by the inauguration offering. They also brought a goat of Rosh Chodesh because it was Rosh Chodesh. It was Rosh Chodesh Nisan. Remember the inauguration of the Mishkan? So they also brought that goat. That was the one that Aaron didn't eat, and it was Moshe got upset. Why didn't you eat it? It was a special thing. He says, no, this is not an inauguration offering. This is a regular Chodesh offering. Anyway, over there it says it will carry the sin of the congregation. And he learns like this. The Yalef Avoin Mitzitz. It says over there Avoin, which means iniquity. I try to use that word with Avoin. Iniquity. So Avoin. And it says Avoin also by the tits. So Reb Shimon by the tits means the front plate on the forehead that the Kohen Gadol wore. So just like Nemer Kan Avoin, Realfim says Nemer Kan Avoin v'Nemer La'ala Avoin. Also says by the tzitz Malala and Tumas Basar. By the tzitz, we know that it's an atonement that if the meat of the sacrifice became contaminated and it was brought on the altar, it's an atonement. Afkan, so also over here by Rosh Chodesh, it says Avoin, the sacrifice of Rosh Chodesh. Avoin, that's also talking about Tumas Basar. Now, it's very different. Over there, it was talking about when you brought it on the altar, the tzitz. If someone brings a sacrifice that's impure on the altar and without awareness, the tzitz atones for that. Now we're talking about someone that ate the sacrifice that was impure. So the Gemara says, mala halan, 1 second, if you're going to take this seriously, then we're going to do this comparison. Then by the tzitz, oilin, it was brought on the altar. And it's coming to tell me that the sacrifice is going to be accepted. Afkan, oilin. Also over here, we should say that you bring it on the altar, but it's not talking about a kayan that ate it when it was tamei. The Gemara says, avoin ha'ediksiv, no. By us, by the Sarah of Rosh Chodesh, it says a sin of the congregation. The Gemara says, okay. So sin of the congregation means that someone ate it. Michti, let's see. Migmar Gemiri Adad. Rosh Chodesh is compared to the tzitz. We learn one from the other with a verbal analogy, with the Gzer Shava. Nechaper the Rosh Chodesh adidei b'ad tzitz. So let the sacrifice of Rosh Chodesh also atone for what the tzitz atones for. If we learn one from another, then let's do the whole thing. So, which means that if a sacrifice is brought on the altar, even though it's impure, but the offering of Rosh Chodesh should atone for that. Nafkamina, and why would this? We have the tzitz. Why do you need this for? Let's say the tzitz broke. How did it break?
Maybe the strings or just the
yeah. And there's a discussion if it only atones while he's wearing it, or. But how would it break? Let me see if there's any comment here. Yeah, this is very interesting because the opinion of Reb Shimon in Masech Yoma is that the tzitz atones even while the Kohen Gadol is not wearing it. So the Gemara could have answered that. What do you mean? Well, the nafkamina, what's the practical difference if he's not wearing it? No, but the Gemara now is discussing the opinion of Reb Shimon that says that the atonement of the Rosh Chodesh offering is for impure sacrifice. And so I can't answer that it's talking about when the kain's not wearing it, because Reb Shimon doesn't need the kain to wear. So it's talking about only when it broke. Okay. So Amakra, the pasuk to explain this, why doesn't it atone for both things, right? So the pasuk says, "Avayin echad unaisei." One, it says Avayin, which means Avayin echad unaisei. It's only one sin that it atones for. It doesn't atone for two sins. Literally means it doesn't carry two sins. It means so let the tzitz atone for both things. Because we did the comparison, it should also atone for a kayan that eats impure sacrifice. It says nafkamina. Why do we need that? We have Rosh Chodesh. Nafkamina l'tumadeira bein zelazeh. Someone ate from a sacrifice in between two Rosh Chodesh in the middle of the month, so he doesn't have the atonement yet. We'll say no, he does. The tzitz is there. Amar Kra oisa. It says that Rosh Chodesh was given as an atonement for eating impure sacrifices. It itself. It's only the sacrifice that does this atonement, and not the tzitz that does this atonement. Rashi says, it says by Rosh Chodesh Avayna Eida, the sin of the congregation, and Eida v'lei kadashim. It's an atonement for the congregation, but it's not for the sin of the sacrifice itself. It's only atonement for the person that ate it, not for the being brought on the altar. And over there by the tzitz it says Avayna Kadashim, the sin of the holies, of the sacrifice. That means HaKadashim v'layayida. So Rashi is medayik from the psukim. Sin of the congregation or sin of the holies. Sin of the holies means that it was brought on the altar even though it's impure. Tzitz atones for that. Sin of the congregation means that a kayan ate from it, and that the carbon of Rosh Chodesh atones for it. Now, Ashkechan Sira Shechadashim b'Mechapri Al Torah Shachal Asatami. So far, what we've established is that the goat of Rosh Chodesh, according to Reb Shimon, his unique opinion, is that it atones for someone that ate an impure sacrifice. He was pure; the sacrifice was impure. But what about the other one, the sacrifice of the goats of the holidays? What does he know? How does he know from there? How does he know that that's an atonement for someone that has no awareness? So how did we get this according to the other opinion, according to Rabbi Yehuda? He said the goat of the holidays. Remember how we compared this? We just did this. We said Visa'ir. Both of them had the Vav. So the Gemara answers, no problem. Same way. Kida Amar Reb Chama Bar Chanina. Like the Reb Chama Bar Chanina taught. It says Sa'ir Visa'ir. It says goat and the goat. And that extra Vav taught me to learn one from the other. Goat of Rosh Chodesh teaches the goat of the holidays. Achanami Sar Visar. We're going to learn because it says the extra Vav. Gemara says 1 second. And then it goes on. It says, and it compares the goat of the holidays to the goat of Rosh Chodesh Masar, the Rosh Chodesh Mosa, the Kodesh Mechapre. Don't look at me. We're right on the top of Yud. Right on the top of Yud. Just as the goat of the holidays is, I'm sorry, just like the goat of Rosh Chodesh is an atonement for something of the holies. According to him, it's someone that ate an impure sacrifice. So also the goat of the holidays will be atoned for something that has to do with Kodesh. No, it's not exactly the same thing. Now I was talking about a Kohen that entered into the temple. It's not perfect. It worked out much better in the other opinion. Gemara says, and if you'll say that it should atone for both, that the Sir Regalim should atone for what Rosh Chodesh atones for. So the Gemara says, Ha'amrinan, that you can't say because it says, I saw Naisei Avain ve'ein acher Naisei Avain. You already said that only that sacrifice, it, is an atonement for someone that eats impure sacrifice. We wanted to say the tits before we started to say the tits won't be atonement. Now we're saying that the holiday of the sacrifice of the holidays won't be an atonement for it. Maybe we'll say that it should be an atonement. The goat of the holidays should be an atonement. The same thing that Yom Kippur is an atonement for. Yom Kippur, the goat, the outer goat of Yom Kippur is an atonement if there's an awareness at the end, but no awareness at the beginning. Maybe the holidays should be the same thing. It says, can't say that because Amrina and Achas Bashana says that's an atonement once a year. It's like Achas Bashana. Only once a year do we have an atonement for an awareness at the end, but no awareness at the beginning. Okay. What is the actual atonement that occurs from the goat of the holidays? If you tell me that it's talking about when there's an awareness at the beginning and an awareness at the end, so by carbonu, that's a regular sacrifice he has to bring. The carbonai leviyared, that the individual person has to bring the sacrifice. If you say that there's an awareness at the beginning, but no awareness at the end. So we said that's that we already know from the goat that was brought on the inside, which was the pair of goats, right? The one that was also one that was an atonement for an awareness at the beginning, but he didn't know yet at the end that he was that he did that sin. So that's an atonement. And if there's atonement at the end, but not at the beginning, there's no awareness at the not awareness. There's no awareness at the beginning, but there's an awareness at the end. Then that we already have a goat. That's the goat that's brought outside. So al karchach, what are we left with? We're compelled to say there's no awareness at all. Got it all set up over here, according to Reb Shimon. The inner goat of Yom Kippur, there's awareness at the beginning, no awareness at the end. The outer goat of Yom Kippur is awareness at the end, not at the beginning. The goat of Rosh Chodesh is if someone ate an impure sacrifice. The goat of the holidays is if there's no awareness at the beginning or an awareness at the end. The tzitz is an atonement for the sacrifice that's brought on the altar. That's what we accomplished over here with Rav Shimon. Rav Meir Reimer, Rav Meir says, "Kol asirim kapras and shavachulu." He says all the goats have the same atonement. They're all for Tumas Mikdash Kedusha. What is he referring to? When there's no awareness at the beginning, but there is an awareness at the end, or there's no awareness at the beginning or at the end. And the same as if a person ate from a holy thing that became impure. Now, Reb Meir is leaving out one detail, and that is if there's an awareness at the beginning, but no awareness at the end, so that is unique to the goat that goes inside the sanctuary. That one goat of the pair, that goat is unique that it atones for an awareness at the beginning, but no awareness at the end. But if there's no awareness at the beginning and no awareness at the end, or if there's no awareness at the beginning, but yes, awareness at the end, then all these other goats atone for the outer goat, the Rosh Chodesh goat, the holiday goat. They'll all atone for that, for those options. All right. I'm Reb Chaim Bar Chanina. My time with Reb Meir. We've been quoting Reb Chaim Bar Chanina a few times, and we were all quoting it from here. Each time we quoted it, it was from here. In explaining Reb Meir, Reb Chaim Bar Chanina says, "Amar Kra." What's the reason for Reb Meir? Amar Kra, he says the pasuk says Seir Useir. Could have said Seirizim, but instead it said Useir. It says and the goat. So Ukshu Kol Asirim Zelzeh. All the goats are compared one to another. Maisif al Inyan Rishon, coming to add to what the first one had. Okay. Now, what's interesting is I remember on Sukkot, it doesn't always say Useirizim. Okay, on the first day of the holiday, it says Useirizim. Second day, Useirizim. On the third day, Useirizim. Fourth day, Useirizim. On the fifth day, Useir Chatas Echad. Okay, Useir. On the sixth day, Useir. Seventh day, Useir. The eighth day, Useir. So where do I remember from? It says where it says Seir Yizim Echad L'Chatas without a vav. Yeah, that is the Esra L'Chedesh Ashvi only on Yom Kippur. Only on Yom Kippur. Seir Yizim Echad Chatas, and it doesn't have Useir. Amazing, huh? What about Pesach? Useir Yizim. Yom Shvi. Yom HaBikurim. What happens on Shavuos? Shavuos, it says Seir Yizim Echad L'Chaper Aleichem. Okay, we're gonna have to figure that one out.
Got a whole half a page on this.
What is that? Wait, what is the note?
It's so long. There's a little chart.
Derivation runs as follows: the three basic categories of Musaf, he goat, Rosh Chodesh, he goat, the other he goat, and the festival he goat. Okay, yeah, we'll go through this.
Yeah, we will go through it.
Yeah, I think I think it spells itself out. I think that's just okay. Kasal Kadaita. Kol Chad v'Chad Mechabri Gomer. That each of the goats is learned from one from the other. In other words, It would go like this, that the goat of Yom Kippur is written right next to the goat of Sukkot. So the goat of Yom Kippur is an atonement for Ein Ba Yediyah, the outer goat of Yom Kippur is only when there's an awareness at the end, right? And so Yom Kippur, so Sukkot would tell me that it's when there's no awareness at all. Then the goat of Rosh Chodesh is next to the one for Pesach. That would tell me that it's also an atonement for a kohen that eats something that's tamei. And Sukkot was next. Okay, whatever. Let's see. Okay, so in other words, the Gemara thinks that we're going to learn one from another. What we learned from this will now be added on to that one. And this one now we have, it becomes compounded. Right? Each one is learned, and we're going to spread it over to the other ones because we learn them all together. Problem is, Rabbi Yechanan says, "Kol terakul lamedim lamed milamed lamed milamed." In the entire Torah, if I learn one thing from a comparison,
Right.
then I can learn from that. I can now extend it over to something else because it's already been learned to this. Now from this, I can learn it over to that. It's like germs, right? But chutz mikadashim, but by kadshim, I can't do that. Shein lamedim lamed milamed. I can only learn it one. It stops right there. It doesn't continue on to the next thing. So how can you say that I'm going to learn all the goats one to another? Umar says, "Oh, like kasha, that's not a problem, because we're not learning one to the other. Kula mikama gamri, we're all learning them all from the goat of Rosh Chodesh, and we're learning all of them from the goat of Yom Kippur. So that's fine. Okay. Teinach. This is going to work out. It's called the Ksiv Dei Visar.
There's a from the one that's next to it, not
Yeah,
the derivative.
the exact one, right? I can't learn it from what it was learned from, right?
Previous group.
Yeah. So if it says Visa'ir, so good, so I can learn the extra vav is coming to connect. But at Atzeres v'Yom Kippurim like Visar minalan. What are we going to do about Shavuos and what are we going to do about Yom Kippur? Remember, I went look through the parsha over there. It only says Sa'ir, a goat. It doesn't say and a goat. Elam Rabbi Yaina says to figure this one out. It says Amar Kra. The pasuk says, "Eila taso la Hashem b'mayadechem." This is what you should do for Hashem on your holidays. All the holidays are compared one to another. Okay. How do we learn from the goat of Rosh Chodesh? Rosh Chodesh lav mayadu. If you're going to do a comparison here, because it says mayadechem, your holidays, mayad means designated time, which is what we call a holiday, festival. So, but Rosh Chodesh is not a festival. So, Gemara says Ibra. Ibra means in truth, be'emes. Rosh Chodesh nam yichri mayad. Truth is, you're getting too detailed over here. Rosh Chodesh is also called a holiday. Damar Abaya, as Abaya says, Damar Abaya, that Abaya said that usually the month of Tammuz is only 29 days. However, Tammuz Dishata, Tammuz of that year, the year that the Jewish people left Egypt, Maluye Malyuhu, it became a leap month. The way it works is Nisan is full, Nisan is 30, Iyar is 29, Sivan is 30, Tammuz is 29, Elul is 30, Tishrei is 29. Goes on and on. Right? So Tammuz is normally 29 days. But the year that the Jewish people came out of Egypt, the year they sent the spies, so that became a 30-day. And the Ksiv, because we say in Eicha, Kara Laimayit, Lishbar Bachurai, he called it a holiday, a festival, to destroy the youth. Now, this is talking about the Meraglim, that they left to spy out the land on the 22nd day of Sivan. And they came back 40 days later. Now, if Tammuz is a full month, so then they came back on Tisha B'Av, the night of Tisha B'Av. So what we're saying is, whatever the case is, whatever we're saying over there regarding Tisha B'Av and the spies, and that was the Bechiyah L'Dairis, was a crying for all future generations. But whatever the case is, what we're gaining from this is that Rosh Chodesh is called a Mayid. Karalai Mayid. You called it a holiday. You called it a festival. Okay. So now, if that's the case, then when the pasuk says, "So you should do for Hashem on all the festivals," it's referring to Rosh Chodesh as well. It compares all the festivals together, including Rosh Chodesh. And that's why the women can't push the button on the dryer. Okay. Rabbi Yochanan. Rabbi Yochanan says that the women they don't do work on Rosh Chodesh. What's the work today? Nothing. Okay. Rabbi Yochanan. So they joke about the barbecues also. The woman sets up. She marinates the meat and everything, and she cuts the salad and she sets the table, and the guy goes outside. He puts everything that's already prepared on the grill. He brings it back in, and the wife cleans up and but he takes all the credit. Okay. So Rabbi Yochanan says, "Meider Rab Meir b'so'ir hanasi b'fnim shahu eina mechaper kaparasan behein ein mechaper kaparasi." Okay, so I told you before that Rab Meir leaves out one sacrifice from this whole equation. What we just did was we put all the sacrifices all together, and they say they're all an atonement for if there's no awareness at the beginning, but there's an awareness at the end, or there's no awareness at the beginning or at the end, or if Kayan ate something that was impure, all the sacrifices are atonement for that, except he didn't say one thing. He says, however, Meir would agree that the goat that's brought inside the sanctuary, the blood is brought inside the sanctuary, that special goat, that's the peer with the one that's brought to Azazel, and then this one was the sacrifice. And it doesn't have the same atonement as them. The Hain, and those other sacrifices, they don't have his atonement. And he doesn't have their atonement because it says kapara achas mechaper bein mechaper stay kaparas. It quotes the pasuk. Pasuk says that Aaron will atone on the corners once a year. That means that there's one atonement that's done, and you don't have two atonements. What was this for? We said that this was for an awareness at the beginning, but no awareness at the end. And they don't atone for it. Because it says in the pasuk, once a year it's going to be atoned, which means kapara zu. We only have one atonement for this, so it goes both ways. First of all, it says it only gets atoned for once, and it also we only do it once a year. No, I'm sorry, not it gets atoned for. It only is one atonement. It only is one atonement, and also this atonement is only once a year. Right. So that tells me that it doesn't have the others, and also the others don't have it. Oh. Okay, Tanya Namiyachi was also taught in the Brisa to support Rabbi Yochanan. Al shem b'yediyah lebetchil lebesayif, al shem b'yediyah betchila v'yesh b'yediyah besayif. If he doesn't have any awareness, not at the beginning and not at the end, or he doesn't have any awareness in the beginning, but he has an awareness at the end. Or someone that was pure that ate impure sacrifice. So these goats of Rosh Chodesh, or of the festivals, or of the one that's brought outside in the temple, in the Mishkan, that's atonement for those types of lack of awareness. That's the words of Rameir. But it doesn't talk about the goat that was brought inside. Left that out. And also the atonement, they also don't, the other animals don't atone for this as well. So that has its own atonement. Yeah. Okay. Higher Reb Shimon Aimer. Shimon would say, Reb Shimon Bar Yochai, that the goat of Rosh Chodesh atones not for someone that entered into the temple when he was tamei, but he says differently. He says for a pure person, pure kayan, that ate from a sacrifice that had become impure, and also the holiday sacrifice, the festival sacrifices, they're an atonement for. Reb Shimon says for no awareness at all when he entered the temple, no awareness that he was tummy, not before, not after. And the one from Yom Kippur was an atonement for an awareness at the beginning, but no awareness at the end. Okay. No awareness at the beginning, but there was an awareness at the end. That's for the outer goat of Yom Kippur. So now, in Reb Shimon, we understand why does Rosh Chodesh not do an atonement for what the holidays do an atonement for? Damakra, because the pasuk says Avain Echaru Naisevein Naisishte Avainis. We learned this before, that it's only that the Rosh Chodesh offering is an atonement for a sin, and we learned the sin from the tzitz, right? He said it only does one atonement. It doesn't do two atonements. So it's not going to atone for someone that enters into the temple. It's only atoning for the person that ate from a sacrifice that became impure. But let it go the other way. Why does the holidays not atone for someone that ate from a sacrifice that was impure? And it will be an atonement. Only the Rosh Chodesh sacrifice will atone for this, and not the holidays. We understand that the festival sacrifice doesn't atone for what Yom Kippur atones for. Damakra, because the pasuk says regarding the Yom Kippur, it says Achas B'Shana. This atonement only takes place once a year. Kaparazu like the Achas B'Shana. This atonement is only once a year, not on the festival. It's only on Yom Kippur. It's talking about that the atonement for someone that knows that he became tamei, that's not going to take place on the festival. Yom Kippur and the Chapra the Golim, but Yom Kippur should atone for what the festivals when there's no awareness at all, right? Let Yom Kippur atone for that. Amakra achas kapara achas mechaper. Yom Kippur sacrifice only atones for one sin. It doesn't atone for two sins. It doesn't atone for when there's no awareness at all. That's only for the festival. But you're quoting the wrong pasuk. That when it says once, that's talking about the goat that was brought inside, which we're not even referring to. We're referring to the goat that was brought outside when there's an awareness at the end, not an awareness at the beginning. So Amakra. So for this, the Gemara explains that when it's talking about the sacrifice that are brought in Yom Kippur, it says milvad chatas haKippurim. Besides for the sin offering of Yom Kippur. The outer goat, besides for the inner goat, the iska shchitz and the pnimi, and we're going to learn the outer one from the inner one, so that's going to help us over here. But we're going to say that even though it says the word achas by the pnimi, which is not what we're referring to, but because it says milvad chatas haKippurim, which is comparing the sin offerings of Yom Kippur one to another, going to tell me that the outer one will also be only once a year, and it's only that atonement will only be once and not on the festivals. Okay, now Reb Shimon ben Yehuda Omer Shmai. Shimon ben Yehuda says in the name of Reb Shimon, I believe, right? In the name of Reb Shimon or Reb Meir? Reb Shimon. In the name of Reb Shimon. He says like this. What we've learned so far is that each sacrifice has a very unique what it's going to atone for. Reb Shimon ben Yehuda says no, it's more like a pyramid. Some of them are going to atone for everything. And then some of them are going to atone for a little bit less and a little bit less. The bottom one we have all the, and then the next one is, well, not all of them, but most of them. And then that's good. The way he does it is like this: that the goat offering of Rosh Chodesh atones for someone that's pure but eats something that's impure. Regalim, the festivals, atones for that as well, but it also atones for where there's no awareness at all. Yom Kippur atones for both of those, plus also someone that only had an awareness at the end. You get it? So it's working its way. We started with small, it's working its way down. It's large. The Gemara asks, how come Rosh Chodesh only atones for the person that ate the impure sacrifice, but it won't atone for someone that has no awareness at all, and when he entered the temple, not before, not after, that he was done? The Damar Kra, for this we have a pasuk. It says Avain, the sin, iniquity. Avain Echaru Naisei, that the goat offering of Yom Kippur is only one atonement. The Einai Naisei Shtei Avainis, it doesn't do two atonements. Okay, so Rosh Chodesh is going to be limited to just that. So why does the holidays atone for what Rosh Chodesh atones for? It says Damar Kra Isa. It says it is an atonement. Only the Rosh Chodesh offering should be the atonement for someone that eats an impure sacrifice. Why should the festival offering atone for that? It's only once. It's only this is the atonement for that. It says according to this interpretation, Reb Shimon ben Yehuda, in the name of Reb Shimon, he doesn't learn that Isa is telling me that. Isa doesn't tell him it's exclusive. Why the festival is not atoned for what Yom Kippur atones for? Yom Kippur atones for even when there's an awareness at the end. Because on Yom Kippur it's only once a year. This atonement should only be once a year. If that's the case, so why is Yom Kippur atoning for what the holidays atone for, which is when there's no awareness at all? It says that it's one atonement. It only does one atonement, doesn't do two atonements. Why is it atoning for the holidays? Kumar doesn't ask yet why it doesn't atone for what Rosh Chodesh atones for. It says achas le'mashma. He doesn't learn achas like that it's exclusive. Okay. Amai, why doesn't he learn from achas? The chiksev achas, because where does it say achas? B'sar nasa b'fnim ksev. The word achas was said by the other sacrifice, the sacrifice that was done inside the sanctuary. Remember, we had to do a comparison to get it to be referring to the outer one. Yihachi, if that's the case, the regalim nami nechapru ad Yom Kippurim. Let the holiday sacrifice atone for what Yom Kippur. Chiksev achas b'sar nasa b'fnim. Because where does the pasuk achas say? Where does it say the word one? It says it by the sacrifice that was done inside, and that was the atonement for if someone had awareness at the beginning but not at the end. One explains Laila achas mashmalei. Really, he does learn from the word achas that once a year tells me that it's only going to be once a year, and therefore the festival sacrifice can't atone for what Yom Kippur atones for. It's not talking about the Yom Kippur sacrifice that we're referring to. It's talking about the inner sacrifice, not the outer sacrifice. Shani hacha, the Amar Kra v'chiper Aaron al karnais v'achas b'shana. It says that Aaron will atone on the corners once a year. When it says once a year, it's talking about so karnais means the inner altar. Karnais of the mizbeach hapnimi. The mizbeach hapnimiu. It's talking about the corners of the inner altar. The kapara achas mechaper v'ena mechaper shtei kaparas. That atones only once a year. The chitzain, but the outer altar, shtei kaparas, it can atone for two atonements, which means it can also atone for what the festivals atone for, which is when there's no awareness at all. So the inner altar would only atone once, but the outer altar would atone for two things. What is that? The goat that's brought on the outer altar would atone for if there's no awareness at all, or if there's no awareness at the beginning, but there's an awareness at the end. We also learned that it would also atone for someone that ate something that was impure. Okay, let's leave it over here. Yeah. Okay.
Okay, thank you. Have a good day.
Yeah, thank you. Have a good week.